Good evening. I'd like to call the, see what today's date, Tuesday, September 30th, 2014 Planning Commission meeting to order. If everyone would please rise and state the Pledge of Allegiance with me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And we'll start with roll call on my right this evening. Gilmore here.
Kimsey here.
Smader here.
Lavella here.
Austin here.
Quorum is present. Having nothing on the consent agenda this evening, we'll move into new business. Just a quick reference note for the commissioners. There is a informational item that did not get added to the agenda. Staff has a quick update for us. So we'll do that following the new business item that we have. So, new business item. We have Olathe Ford RV, a preliminary plat 14-02 for Olathe Ford RV. Consider a preliminary plat for Olathe Ford RV for an existing 33.06 acre commercial development located at the southwest corner of Interstate 35 and South Gardner Road, submitted by Judd Clausen of Phelps Engineering on behalf of Mark McEver, property owner of record. Also with this first item, we will be reviewing Final Plat -14-05, the final plat for Olathe Ford RV. Consider a final plat of Lot 1, Olathe Ford RV subdivision, a 7.29 acre commercial development located at the southwest corner of Interstate 35 and South Gardner Road, submitted by Judd Clausen of Phelps Engineering on behalf of Mark McEver, property owner of record. We have a staff presentation for us this evening.
Good evening, Commissioners. Travis Holtz, planner. I think I should probably speak on behalf of the applicant in saying we appreciate this special meeting this evening to get to this item that was deferred from last week. So thank you for being willing to come together. All right. So I'm going to start with the preliminary and final plat for Olathe Ford RV. It, as stated, is a 33.06 acre commercial development. There's currently a number of existing improvements related to the Olathe Ford RV business, as you can imagine. A part of that is a lot of outdoor display for sale to the public. A number of buildings being used for service and repair as well as sales and so forth. Currently, this entire site is composed of four existing parcels that remain unplatted at this point in time. Our subdivision regulations require that in order for a building permit to be issued, the ground on which the building will take place is required to be platted beforehand. So that is why this process is being required and requested by the applicant. So the four existing parcels, as a part of the preliminary plat application, are being proposed to be combined into two separate lots. This is Lot 1 and Lot 2, both of which front onto South Gardner Road. There will be no additional streets, sidewalks, utilities, anything of that sort. The preliminary plat does outline all of the existing utilities and right-of-way and easements, showing where the existing lines are, and a number of which are in process of being vacated or have been. There is one additional easement that would be granted by the property owner in the future, something not to be determined this evening because that would go through with the final plat application, and this easement that I show here is for a separate utility easement being granted to, for Gardner Energy and others, with existing utility lines already in place. But again, that's not something that's going to be a part of the final plat application this evening, but just to point that out as something that further down the road, when a final plat does come through for that other lot or a portion of that contains this easement, then that would need to be a part of the application as well. Lot 1 is what is being requested for final plat. The final plat requires that an excise tax be levied. The current rate is 20 cents per square foot. The Lot 1 is approximately 7.29 acres and would require that prior to the recording of the final plat, that excise tax be paid in full. Again, no new streets, sidewalks, utilities are proposed for this replat. Ordinance number 2456 released an existing 40-foot water and sewer easement, a portion of which does bisect into Lot 1, and that was approved by City Council previously to date. So nothing that needs to be determined at this meeting. Staff's recommendation is that the preliminary plat, our recommendation is for approval of the preliminary plat PP 14-02 for Olathe Ford RV, as well as the final plat. Because there are not any easements and or right-of-way, I think in the staff report that it had mentioned, we would forward this on to City Council for the acceptance of easements. However, it should read that staff recommends the Planning Commission approve final plat FP 14-05 for Olathe Ford RV and forward it to City Council with a recommendation of approval, subject to the following conditions. One being that prior to the recording of the final plat, the required excise tax is paid.
Thank you. Do we have anything from the applicant this evening?
Unless you have specific questions.
Okay, great, thank you. We'll open up the Planning Commission discussion. You guys have questions for staff or the applicant? Have any questions or comments? I would entertain a motion for this item.
Okay, Madam Chair, I move that we approve A, preliminary plat, PP-1402 for Olathe Ford RV, and B, final plat, FP-1405 for Olathe Ford RV, forwarded to City Council with a recommendation for approval, subject to the following conditions. Number 1, prior to the recording of the final plat, the required excise tax shall be paid.
We have a motion by Lovello with a second by Gilmore to approve preliminary plat PP-14-02 for Olathe Ford RV and approve final plat FP-14-05 for Olathe Ford RV and forward it to the City Council with a recommendation to accept the easements subject to the following conditions as outlined. 1, prior to the recording of the final plat, the required excise tax shall be paid. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries with all in favor. New business item, excuse me, number 1C, SP-14-04, site plan for Olathe Ford RV. Consider a site plan for the expansion of Olathe Ford RV located at 19310 South Gardner Road, submitted by Judd Clausen of Phelps Engineering on behalf of Mark McEver, property owner of record. Do we have a staff presentation on this item?
Good evening again. Currently, as stated with the plat application, this is an aerial image of the site as it somewhat resembles today and the improvements associated with it. As a part of the site plan application, the applicant is proposing to add a 4,400 square foot building expansion. It's a part of Lot 1 that at this point in time has been approved for final plat with the conditions of approval. The building expansion requires that the ground be platted prior to building permit issuance. Other existing conditions, as stated previously, outdoor storage for the display to the public, parking areas both for employees and for the public as well, and existing metal buildings. This is to show where the proposed addition is being suggested for the application, and we'll get into a little bit more exactly how that relates to the requirements in landscaping, design standards, and a number of other items. This is the site plan provided and submitted for review and approval by you, the Planning Commission. To highlight a couple of things, again, this is the 4,400 square foot building addition. This is specifically going to be used for public transaction. There's going to be office areas inside as well as sales offices. So this is where the public will enter the building, and the other portions of the site, the existing improvements, are to be used, as we understand, for repair and services. So strictly speaking, this is where the public would enter the facility. There's also a future campground display area shown on the proposed site plan. The applicant has been made aware that for any significant redevelopment that it is to be proposed in the future may potentially require the Planning Commission to again review a site plan application. Being designated as a future campground display area is appropriate. So any improvements based on what the code would tell us for meeting that criteria may require additional review at a later date, but as of now is acceptable. There's additional parking to be shown here at the front of the public entrance. Currently, none of the parking areas are striped, designated specifically either for employees or for the public. They are showing 8 proposed stalls here, as well as an additional 40 stalls throughout the site to be used for, again, both employee and public parking. The applicant, as a condition of approval, is being asked to stripe at least 18 of the required parking stalls. That meets the minimum required parking is 18. They're proposing to have up to 48. So staff would encourage, as a condition of approval, that at least 18 of the required parking stalls out of the total 48 be striped specifically to designate for the use by public and others. This will help overall with the site and the navigation for people who come and go, and for the RVs who will be traveling throughout the area as well. It's a safety thing that would be important to consider. Here are the proposed elevations. If you remember, this expansion will add on to an existing building, so the east, north, and south elevations, there is no south elevation per se. There is a portion of this new building that will be exposed on the southern side, but it's fairly minimal. To point out a couple of different items to meet the design standards as reviewed by staff. There are a number of different architectural features highlighted with those red dots that are meeting a variety of design principles, including rhythm and expression. These help to break up any large blank wall areas, as well as setting apart the public entrance from all other portions of the building. Allows people to logically understand how to navigate the site. Circled there in red is additional stone material, as well as some freestanding columns that will be added to the building to help with some of the other elements, including expression, which requires that Any change in materials wrap the entire building as is proposed by the applicant. They meet all the design standards and requirements that we have reviewed this application based upon. The overall building itself is going to be more of an industrial look. The roof and the siding are both going to be metal, pre-finished metal, and that is consistent with the existing buildings already on site as well. So it will meet the compatibility and the cohesiveness of what is already there. Signage is proposed with the site plan application. Signage is truly reviewed separately from the site plan application. As shown here, specific to the C3 zoning district, which is the location of this facility, they would be allowed to have 3 signs, 1 per facade, no more than 1 on a facade, and certain square footage requirements. In lieu of one of those wall facade signs, they would be able to have a detached sign. That is something that will be reviewed at a later date, but just to point those out as being areas that have been proposed by the applicant. In addition, they have provided screening for ground-mounted mechanical units. There is no rooftop units to be screened, and again, they generally meet all design standards as required. In addition to our design standards, we also have our landscaping requirements. The required landscaping is based on a couple of things, based on the total street frontage and based on the total square footage of the area. That's how we determine how many site trees we need, how many internal trees, bushes, so on and so forth. This site is unique based on the site limitations that it currently has. I've highlighted in the black dashed lines a current water line easement. Our code states that any street trees would need to be planted within the first 15 feet of the property and outside of any utility easement. This utility easement is 20 feet, so they would not be able to meet this either way. That is one of the site limitations that they're working with. Another is a large amount of impervious surfaces due to the parking areas and the display areas make it difficult for adding additional landscaping. They are proposing to add planters along the front facade of the public entrance of the new expansion. And here are some of the existing landscape elements that we would not require be removed. Those highlighted in red are going to be removed due to a new parking area. Those highlighted in yellow are to remain. One of the things that the code would allow for, due to the site limitations and required landscaping, is the warrant of an exception. And it would be our recommendation as staff that the Planning Commission, by approving this application and the conditions of approval, would find that such an exception is warranted, and thereby they would be able to come back with staff and determine how we can work with the site limitations and the landscaping requirements to make sure that we get some of those elements, screening, street trees and so forth, into the site without creating any major safety issues or any loss of property that the applicant could have in the future. Staff's recommendation is the Planning Commission would approve the site plan for a laser sport RV located at the southwest corner of the intersection Interstate 35 and South Gardner Road, subject to the following conditions. 1, that the applicant shall stripe at least 18 required parking stalls with a total of 48 provided, 8 of which shall be located along the public entrance in accordance with the approved site plan. All proposed landscaping not in compliance with the location requirements shall be revised on the landscape plan to show suggested alternatives and submitted with a written description explaining why said deviations are being requested for the determination and approval by the community development staff prior to the issuance of a building permit. I'm going to stop. That's somewhat of a mouthful. So, in order to receive the exception again, Planning Commission, as approved, you would grant to them the exception and allow staff to work with them. The quantity that they're proposing meets the requirements. It's the location that causes the problem. So they would just need to come back to work with staff to revise their location of the landscaping elements that fall within that easement that would need to be moved back. I failed to mention that the smaller areas highlighted in front along the eastern border of the image, those are perennial flower planting beds. Some existing bushes are already there, and that's something that is allowable by city standards to have those types of areas in the right-of-way is where that would be. Hopefully that makes sense. And then item 3, any additional building accessories located on the proposed building additions not shown on the approved elevation shall be painted to match the primary color of the building from which they project.
Thank you. The applicant have anything in particular for this piece?
Unless you got questions for your Aaron.
Okay, great. Questions from the commissioners?
I don't know if it's as much a question as just if we do recommend this for them to work out with staff. It looks like, to me, they may be covering up that existing fire hydrant. So make sure that remains visible and accessible.
Where's that at?
It should be just south of their driveway, it looks like. I'm reading it right now, maybe it's north. North of the driveway.
Are you on the landscape plan?
I'm looking at two different plans, C2 and the landscape plan.
Label that page.
Here. Oh, there it is. It's not covered.
No.
It's just, yeah, it's not covered.
It's good?
It's good, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Always good to ask. Any questions over here?
Is the reason why you're, clarifying in 3 about the primary colors is because of that future campus use, or why did you guys do that?
A lot of times on elevations, you won't see things like rain gutters, other accessory features on the building itself. Those won't be shown on the elevations. So one of the requirements for our design standards is that any of those types of features would be painted to match the primary building. That way they kind of blend in and don't stick out. So that's the clarification on condition number 3, is referring to if there's anything not shown on elevations that they would be required to be painted.
Okay. Anything down here, guys? Okay, if we don't have further questions or comments, I would entertain a motion for this item.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the site plan for Olathe Ford RV, subject to conditions 1, 2, and 3 listed.
I'll second.
I have a motion made by Lavella with a second by Gilmore that the Planning Commission approve the site plan for Olathe Ford RV located at the southwest corner of Interstate 35 and South Gardner Road, subject to the following conditions 1 through 3 as outlined. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries with all in favor. Now that we're done with the business section of tonight's meeting, Mike, I think you had an additional informational item to share with the commissioners.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Thank you all very much for coming.
Thank you, guys, have a good night.
Commissioner, I owe you a binder. Before I forget to give that to you. So on Monday, the 6th, City Council is holding a work session to cover a couple items. One of these items is some potential amendments to the zoning and subdivision regulations to streamline processes and support economic development. I wanted to make sure you were aware of this. I didn't want you to find out about this without knowing something about it. I didn't know exactly what was going to be in that recommendation or in that work session until a few days ago. So that's actually Thursday last week. So that's why I'm trying to get this on the agenda right now. And I don't have a report to hand out to you. The report that I've written hasn't even gotten its way to the City Council yet, so I wanted to make sure. I'm just going to cover these in slides. So there are 5 main ones I want to talk about. These will affect how you do your business, how you conduct your business to some extent. So the first one, and potentially the one with the greatest impact, is the shortened site plan review processing times by giving the Community Development Department more authority to approve site plans. So you just review the site plan review application, site plan, for a permitted use. And that went before you. Staff does not have, the Community Development Director and staff do not have the authority to approve the type of site plan that you just reviewed. There's some thought for minor site plans, we could save a lot of time, shorten times for the developer, the business person, by granting authority to the Community Development Director in some cases. Just for example, some that we have reviewed in the past few years. Quick Trip, that was a 5,700 square foot building that was reviewed by the Planning Commission. That's one of the larger projects. The McDonald's addition, that was a 233 square foot addition to an existing 3,800 square foot building. That was approved by the Planning Commission. Gardner Energy, there was a 1,000 square foot storage building addition that went to the Planning Commission. And another example is, if you're familiar with the Joy Community Closet on Main Street, that was a change of use of a building, interior remodel, and restriping the parking area. That was approved by staff. That was an administrative level approval. The fire station addition, that was a 1,000 square foot addition to an existing 2,400 square foot fire station. That went to the Planning Commission for approval. You've reviewed Casey's. Another project that was approved by staff was a small vending building, the Ice House in front of the Tumbleweed Bar and Grill. That was approved by staff. In looking at some other cities, what they do, City of Olathe, from what I could tell, just about everything goes to the Planning Commission. Overland Park, everything is approved by staff. City of Shawnee, everything goes to the Planning Commission. City of Lawrence, everything is approved by staff. So the thing to think about is your agendas there will be some things on your agenda. If this goes through, there will be some things on your agenda now that won't be on your agenda in the future. So it's something to think about. When you look at the time it takes for a project to get through the site plan process, from the deadline or the cutoff date for the application to the time it gets to the planning commission in a meeting, it's 40 days. And if they, let's say, they don't hit it right on the cutoff, then it can be longer than that. So if they, let's say they don't have anything together and they submit something and they miss the cutoff by 5 days, then they have to wait another 25 days until the next cycle for it to cycle through the planning commission. So there is a lot of potential to shorten processing time. If there might be a concern by the planning commission, it's that you have less oversight over what gets built in the city garden. And there are some things that you might want to see. There are, well, if a project is very complicated, complex, and there are a lot of issues, staff and the applicant could be in disagreement, and they might end up appealing to the planning commission anyway. We haven't, just looking back on what's happened in the last couple of years, we haven't seen a lot of applications where that would have been the case. But sometimes you think you're streamlining things and doing the development community a favor, but if they don't agree with staff and they want an opinion of a decision-making body, they could appeal it and just be able to draw it out just that much longer. Are there any questions about that at all?
It sounds like you're already doing this to a limited degree. Is it just gonna be a question of how do you define what comes before the commission? It sounds like you're gonna take up more authority to do this.
Yeah, I think, I guess there are three ways to approach this. You can have everything be approved by staff. That takes out any question, where do you draw the line? What gets approved by staff, what gets approved by the commission? So that's one option. One option is to just keep it the way it is. Another option is just to define some threshold at which it would go to the planning commission. It's difficult to define what that threshold should be. For example, you could have a project that's fairly complicated, but it's not very large. The building size isn't very large because of a lot of access issues, that kind of thing. So it's not as simple as just saying a building this size, although you could do it that way, and I've seen it done that way. So this is not a done deal by any means. The city council just asked for us to bring something like this to them. They've asked ways they can streamline the process, trying to be more business friendly, trying to support economic development, and this is one significant way we can do that. And tonight, this is for information. If you have thoughts you want to share, that's perfectly fine. But it's just really an information item. Second one, which is significant, is for planned districts. So anytime you see a district with the P in the, well, not anytime, but for example, I'll give you a couple examples. Arvest Bank, I believe, is a CP3, CP2 district. Might be a CP1. The Nottingham Village on 188th Street, you saw the final development plan for that. That's in a planned district. That's in an RP3 district. Anytime you have a planned district, the only way the rezone can be approved is with a preliminary development plan. So, preliminary development plan is reviewed by the planning commission. It travels with the rezone application. As part of the rezone application, really. It goes to the planning commission. Planning commission makes a recommendation that goes to city council. After the city council approves it, then the applicant submits a final development application, and then it goes to the planning commission. The process is really long and drawn out. What we're suggesting here is that we at least have the option of doing a concurrent review. Concurrent review means that the preliminary development plan and the final development plan would be reviewed by commission at the same time. And the commission could approve a final development plan contingent on approval of the preliminary development plan. I think legally we're on solid foundation here, and that can be done. The applicant might not want to do that because they might not want to put together a bunch of detailed plans, spend their money on design fees for something they don't even know if it's going to float or not. but at least having the option would really cut down on processing time significantly. And this is based on some of the feedback we've gotten from some of the people who've been through the process. You know, they don't necessarily say, boy, that final development plan made it more of a burden. They just, all they know is that they went to this many meetings, they had this many revisions, they paid this much in design fees, and it took them 9 months or 6 months. Another one is allow for the approval of reduced parking requirements by issuing a conditional use permit rather than by variance. Variances are seen by the Board of Zoning Appeals. A variance is really difficult to meet. It's difficult to meet the conditions of a variance. Really, it has to be a hardship and not something that's a self-imposed hardship. It has to be something unique in order for it to really be on a sound legal basis based on the statute and actually based on our code. If it's done as a conditional use permit, it would still have the oversight, and there'd actually be a public hearing. It'd have the oversight of the Planning Commission and the City Council, but you don't have to meet those hardship provisions. It's kind of, they're the other criteria you do have to meet, but it just provides a little more flexibility. So that's another one. When you look at areas in Gardner, there are areas where sometimes it's difficult to meet parking regulations, such as downtown or older areas. The sites are smaller, there are more constraints, and this would make that process a little simpler. The irony of that is, it's kind of a contradiction, because conditional use permit goes to the Planning Commission. Planning Commission makes a recommendation, and then it goes to the governing body. A variance can be approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals, but the criteria are generally easier to meet for a conditional use permit. Do you have any questions?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Not yet. I'm
Okay.
saving mine for the end.
Okay, good. I know we don't want this to go too long, so I'll be quick. Delete or exempt residential development from the design standards requirement that side-by-side transitions between materials, such as a transition from brick veneer to wood lap siding, occur at interior corners. This is something that is very difficult to enforce, just because it's almost impossible to meet it in a literal sense, and it's really a headache for residential builders, and frankly for staff, because we get to listen to them when they're not happy with the process. So the idea is that if you look at this, the facade of this residential, this single-family dwelling, you can see that they have brick veneer on the facade around the garage openings. And in this case, they just run the brick veneer to a trim cap on the corner. But what the standard says literally is, if you look at the left side of that garage, that brick veneer would run around and go all the way back to the interior corner. So you can kind of see why that might be a requirement. But where it gets difficult is if you go to the right side of the garage, there is not an interior corner to run that brick to. So the transition, you would have to wrap it all the way around the back of the house to transition. And this has been done. It hasn't been necessarily enforced in the city. You can drive in neighborhoods in Olathe and Overland Park, and you see this same thing. It's an aesthetic issue, but it's a common practice just to run the brick veneer to the trim. This is an example where they wrapped it on the side. You can see on the left side of the garage, they wrapped it. It looks like they wrapped it a foot in this case. What we're currently doing, the way we're resolving this, is we're requiring them to wrap it 18 inches. And it's not a good situation when the community development director has to make an interpretation about how to enforce something, and it's kind of pulled out of the air, honestly. It's not exactly pulled out of the air. That's not quite that bad. But, anyway, so that's been a problem. I think that's kind of a no-brainer. Another thing, provide for administrative approval of lot line adjustments, lot consolidations, and minor subdivisions. So Kansas statutes allow cities to approve subdivisions or to approve minor adjustments without going to planning commission. Our code just doesn't reflect that. It doesn't have to reflect that. That's a decision that every city can make. But our code does not really provide for simple lot line adjustments. This past year, I had someone that wanted to add on to their house, and they happen to have two lots that are side by side, and they added on in such a way they wanted to cross a lot line, and the code really didn't provide a process for doing that, for approving that. It's one of those things where someone's trying to do something and they're just trying to adjust a lot line or consolidate lots, and you say, well, it's going to take a couple months. They're likely to get approved. It's one of those things where it just kind of doesn't pass the sniff test, and it's really just something that it's pretty. I think it's fairly simple to fix it with an amendment to the subdivision ordinance. So that's the gist of what we're presenting to the city council next week. Any questions or comments?
I think the only question that you had didn't really get answered. What is your threshold today as far as, like, she said the ice machine, little building didn't come to us, you guys approved that on your own, so how do you kind of today decide what comes to us and what doesn't?
The code is a little fuzzy on some of that, and it could be cleaned up, even if we weren't trying to change the way it's done. But the way we're doing it today, and the way we read the code is, if you make amendments, or excuse me, if you amend an existing site plan, or if you amend the site that's been developed, and it's I don't have it in front of me, maybe Travis does, but you can amend, you can change it by a certain percent, 10%. I can say in the case of Joy Community Closet, they weren't adding on any building at all. They were just doing interior work and some exterior work, but not increasing the footprint. Restriping, change of use, they had to get a building permit for the change of use. That one, I think, wasn't all that clear, because there wasn't an existing site plan that was approved. It's old enough, but it's a non-conforming site plan, and they're making minor changes to a building. The Vice House, that was a small addition to that site. It's on the same site as the Tumbleweed, and so I believe it's 10%. Did you find it?
So in the code, and probably don't have your books with you, but right now there's four separate criteria that tell us when it meets that threshold. One is the development results in construction of a building, structure, or addition that increases the gross square footage of the existing development by more than 25%. The second is that the estimated construction costs of all improvements of the development exceed 25% of the most recent appraised fair market value of the existing property. The third is the construction or paving of a parking lot or facility which covers ground previously not used as a parking lot or facility, or the construction or paving of parking lot or facility which does not conform to city pavement. And then the fourth is the intensification of property by a change of use, which increases off-street parking requirements. So those are the four specifically stated in the code that tell us somebody brings in an application to do a building expansion, what have you. If it meets any one of those, then it is required to go to the Planning Commission. If not, then how we've been handling it is staff administratively processes the application and still reviews it for all of the requirements. But
So with the increase in authority, do you know what level those will go to with an increase in authority?
Where the threshold would be? Is that what
Yeah.
you're asking? The threshold? No, we do not. I think that, I know the previous jurisdiction I worked for, it was a commercial building, anything 5,000 square feet or less, it was done administratively. Industrial building, 10,000 10,000 square feet or less, but like the city of Lawrence, it's everything. City of Lawrence, has thresholds at which you have to send notice to adjacent property owners or property owners within 200 feet. We do not send notice on site plans. I think one principle that I think is something to consider is a type of approval that requires some kind of discretion or some kind of subjective judgment. That's something that the planning commission might want to hold on to. But if it's something that's just, you know, there are standards and it's fairly clear, then, you know, that's something that probably ought to be handled by staff. But then there are also other considerations if you feel like you want to see development. And I imagine what will happen is, you know, this will go to the city council to give us direction, and then we'll go through the process of amending, drafting an amendment. You will hold a public hearing, you will review the amendment. You'll be in a position to make a recommendation of approval or approval with modifications to what's been drafted, and then the decision will be made by the city council.
So I have a question, Mike, couple questions. I'm pretty comfortable with all of the recommendations. Can you flip to the first slide, please? The first one is where I don't necessarily agree with. Has it been explored to shorten the processing time by, instead of the, like, I know you said the 40-day cutoff date, has anything been looked at from that perspective? Because I personally just don't know if it's necessarily the right thing for all site plans just to go directly to the community development department. I don't know if I understand the need to maybe make it go quicker because you wouldn't have to have a meeting for that to be ran past the planning commission, but on second hand, I think this is a subjective body, and I don't know if there would be, you know, more questions perhaps if a site plan was just reviewed by community development and it didn't get a second look at something that could have came up. You know, what's the better thing, right? Do you want to rush something through just for time, or do you really want to, you know, take a step back and say, hey, if we're going to do this right and not have questions later down the road, it would be good to go to a body to subjectively review. So I guess that's kind of a twofold question. So, like the cutoff date, I mean, has it been explored down that avenue? Or is that just not even a possibility?
Well,
with timing?
We didn't answer that question. We didn't go to ourselves and ask that question, honestly. But just thinking it through, the way we review site plans and the way we review anything that's going to go to the planning commission, we take in the application and then we review it and we respond to the applicant with comments and questions. And then they submit answers to those questions or even revisions to the plans to address those issues that come up. We'll review it a second time and we'll send that out, and they'll do it. So there are 2 iterations of that, and it takes about, I'd say that process takes about 4 weeks. So, you know, one way to decrease the processing time would be to have only 1 review. I'm not sure we would recommend that you do that, although if it's an administrative approval, if we're going to save any time, we'd have to only have 1 review. So I'm not sure what staff's recommendation is. If City Council has staff's recommendation, I think in just sitting down and talking about it amongst Travis and Michelle, it's difficult to identify what that threshold is. So either it's going to change and it all goes to staff, or just clarify what it is, reflecting what's in the code now. But there are certain projects, if you look back, they're fairly minor. The last one we did is the the salt storage facility by the school district. Basically a storage building. In terms of the site, and in terms of the other buildings, it's relatively minor. You know, if you put a building that size on a in a visible site on Main Street, that'd be a different story, but in terms of its relative size to the site, it's relatively minor. Not really complex issues there, existing development. The other one was the McDonald's remodel, 400 square foot remodel. So, fairly minor project. So there are some, in my personal opinion, this doesn't necessarily reflect the position of any other staff at the city. There are some that have gone to the planning commission that seem relatively minor. It helps if the planning commission doesn't stray into areas of the review they don't need to in the meeting, because that creates a level of uncertainty that's not helpful to economic development and business friendliness. Does that help?
Yeah, and that answers my question.
Is council, you said you're taking this to city council on Monday, are they gonna, is this something you said they're gonna vote on Monday? Or you're
It's a work session, so they're not,
Okay.
they're not taking any action. We are asking them for direction. And I think it's a difficult question to answer, especially for site plan review.
I assume that since other communities are already doing it all administratively, there aren't any sort of state statutes or anything that would require that review be done at an open meeting.
No. No. To answer your question, no, there's not a statutory requirement.
Just another question, how long has the current, code been in place? I mean, was there ever like an initiation at some point in time to say, hey, we want, like, for example, just use number 1, we want the site plan review to go through planning commission, discussion, approval, denial, whatever? Has it?
The site plan process has not been in place all that long. I mean, I think it's been in place since the mid-90s or late 90s. Before that, there was no site plan review required.
Okay.
It was just something that if someone was applying for a building permit and had a permitted use, staff would review it and just approve it as part of the building permit application.
I don't think Gardner was thrown.
No.
Correct.
In 1990, Gardner had a population of 4500 people. Something like that.
I guess would it be appropriate if after the meeting, any one of the commissioners has a question, just to send you an email?
That'd be fine, as long as we don't get into a group discussion.
Correct.
By email with
Just
the quorum.
a
Yeah, as
single,
long as we don't
right,
violate the-
right, just a single
Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
Or maybe something to add to the list to be shared with city council at their work session.
Yeah, I would think city council might ask, well, what is planning commission?
I think they would be interested.
And, I can say that, well, we discussed it with planning commission, but, they will have an opportunity to.
Yeah.
But I'm certainly interested in how the planning commission feels about this, because it will affect what you review.
Right, we've got a couple absent this evening. Can this be shared via email, the deck? Or-
Yes.
Okay,
And you can also attend the work session.
I think that's a great idea.
If you think there's gonna be more than a quorum or more, you probably need to know that.
Okay. I'll probably attend, just me.
When is the work session?
Monday.
6 o'clock, Monday. It's going to be immediately following the work session on utility trailers and RV storage.
Okay.
Rousing. Yeah, it is, isn't it?
Do you have anything else for now?
No.
Okay. Thank you, Mike, appreciate it. If we have nothing else, I would,
I move that we adjourn.
I'll second.
we have have a motion to adjourn made by Lavella with a second by Kinsey. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It is adjourned.
Thanks everybody for coming out.
Yeah.